I know you can't hear me very well because you're still talking. No, I mean, you can still talk. I was just going to ask people to take their seats so we could get started as soon as you stop talking. Is that good, Pam? So if there's empty seats near you, can you just raise your hands? We do have people that are standing. There are some up on the stage. We got some stragglers. They didn't get the memo to be on time. There is some seats on this side over here. There's some seats on this side over here. Right over here. It's okay to be in the front row. All right. Hello, Sundre. I am so happy to see all of you here this afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to an afternoon of Solutions for a New Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project. We are a group of grassroots Albertans with no politicians at our table, committed to... I'm not used to the cheering, okay? Let's keep it down. No, I'm just kidding. But I lost my spot.
No politician!
Thank you. We are a group of grassroots Albertans with no politicians at our table, committed to inspiring, advocating and educating all Albertans on how we can achieve freedom and prosperity through independence. This project actually started last May in an oil field shop in Nisku, where a group of fed-up Albertans, hardworking, fed-up, had enough of top-down, corrupt, tyrannical government meddling in their affairs, got together, and they said, let's do something. And that group of Albertans decided then and there that that's something that they were going to do about the predicament they were in, was to form this project, the Alberta Prosperity Project. I would like to invite our friend and regional leader for Division 6, Pam Koenig, to open the event with a prayer.
Thank you, ma'am. I am so blessed to see every one of you here today. Because we hold truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal in the eyes of our Creator, please join with me as I pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day and this amazing turnout of people. I ask that you be here in this gathering. Give us the courage to stand when all seems against us. Courage to stand for our province, our homes, livelihoods, children, grandchildren, and the generations to come. Bless our time here and give us traveling mercies when we go home. Amen, and thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Pam. My name is Shannon Packham, and I'm from Patricia, Alberta. I'm a teacher, but I have not been inside a classroom since the end of February 2020. And it was on that day that I discovered that if you don't stand up for what is right, then you must understand that you are part of the reason that things are wrong. And since that day, I'm learning to trust that the future that is waiting for all of us is beyond what we might even be able to grasp at this moment. After the presentations that you're going to hear today, I'm hoping that you'll be able to understand what is waiting for all of us, what all we can have. We will plant the seeds of hope, and we will plant the seeds of change. And then we will ask all of you to go out and help those seeds grow. So this is how our events work. We have presentations, and then we have a question and answer period, and then I give you homework to do when you get out of here, and then you all go home. So when you came in, you passed the membership table. So we're a not-for-profit organization. We count on the memberships to keep this bus on the road. So we appreciate that you're coming through the doors and buying those memberships. We also pass the bucket at some point during the afternoon. Be thankful that I'm not part of that because I don't do it well. So we have snacks and coffee on this side over here. Feel free to just help yourselves. We won't be having a break today. The ladies' washroom is on this side at the back, and the gentlemen's washroom is straight back here. And obviously, if there's a fire or some other sort of an emergency, find an exit and leave the building. So normally I ask that you turn your cell phones off because we are live streaming this event. And sometimes with a lot of cell phones, pinging off the towers and etc., it causes a little bit of trouble for the people that are trying to watch at home. So here's your first assignment. I would like for you to go to our Facebook page, Alberta Prosperity Project. It's a blue background with yellow writing. And I'd like you to find the live stream, like it, and share it with a couple of your friends. And then turn your cell phones off. Please. Okay, our first guest. Our first guest is a resident of Edmonton, educated over 17 years at the universities of McGill, Stanford, and the University of Alberta. He is a recently retired 30-year heart and lung surgeon and critical care specialist. He is known as the North American pioneer of heart and lung transplants, implementing the first heart and lung transplant program in Western Canada, performing the first heart transplant in 1985, and the first combined heart with both lungs in 1986. The success of his programs grew to be the largest and most successful in Canada, and one of the largest programs in North America. He has been recognized with numerous awards for excellence in medicine as well as in community service. He is an exceptional community leader and a brilliant mind, and he has always advocated for the overall health and well-being of the people. He is a key driver of this project as our CEO, and on top of all of that, he has had tremendous political influence in the eras of Premiers Getty, Klein, and Stelmach. Here to talk to us today about Alberta's prosperity and freedom through independence, Dr. Dennis Modry.
I'll put it right here. She asked me where I wanted to put my vodka, and so I just put it right here. Well, thanks so much for coming out, ladies and gentlemen. I used this yesterday for the first time because I'd been thinking about this introduction. And I often wondered what the audience thought of someone who took 17 years of university to be educated. You must think that I'm a real slow learner. Anyhow, how many people here are pleased with the performance of our federal government? The Prime Minister? Really? Well, you know, there was that June 4th Angus Reid survey that came out, survey of Albertans. 73% of Albertans are disillusioned with the federal government. It must be the case that the other 23% in Alberta are just disillusioned. Now, what about the performance of our provincial government? How many people are pleased with the performance of our government? And so what does that really tell you? It tells you that nobody is really very happy with government, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be corruption, it could be fiscal mismanagement, it could be making promises that are not kept, lies, as an example. And that particular comment makes me think of a comment by Friedrich Nietzsche, who once said, "I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you." And isn't that the case with government? And there's so much to be said about accountability and responsibility, which absolutely is lacking in government these days. Now, how many people here are concerned about their prosperity and their individual freedoms and rights? Well, I guess that's why you're here today then. 87% of Albertans polled, again by Angus Reid, reported on January the 14th, are concerned about the cost of living and inflation. And you're all experiencing that right now, right? Anybody enjoying the cost of fuel? So I got to tell you a story. I was told to keep it down to under, what was that, Pam, Shannon, to keep it down under an hour and a half? In any case, they're always beating on me. We had an event in Medicine Hat, and I pulled into the Shell with my wife, and we were low on fuel, so I go to the gas pump, and there's no card reader in the gas pump, so I have to go and shop. And I'm looking at the clerk behind this massive plexiglass protective barrier, and I say to him, "Could I have $10,000 worth of gas on pump number 1? And he looks at me, deadpan, and he says, "Would that be regular or V-power?" So, that's a true story. I thought it was pretty funny. I had to share it. Now, don't count that as 2 minutes, okay? All right. Now, we truly are facing an existential threat to our very way of life, to our individual freedoms and rights, and an economic threat to each and every one of us if we do nothing. Now, it's not often that we know the future, but we do know the future in terms of what the World Economic Forum and the United Nations are proposing with the Great Reset. Again, if we do nothing. But I'm here to tell you that if we come together for common cause and do something amazing that has never, ever been done before in this province, the future could be absolutely brilliant. And what is that? Well, that's what the Alberta Prosperity Project is all about. It's to unite all Albertans, businesses and organizations to protect their interests, their individual freedoms and rights, and their prosperity by enabling Alberta to chart a new path forward. And we'll get to what that new path forward is in a moment, a couple of moments. But before doing so, let's look at the dilemma that we're in through the lens of freedoms and through the lens of prosperity. Now, how many people here would like freedom from being overgoverned, overregulated, and overtaxed? How about freedom from wokeness, cancel culture, critical race theory? What about freedom from the Great Reset? And from our earlier comments, I guess you would like freedom from corrupt government as well. But look at the freedoms that we've lost. We've lost freedom of speech. We don't really have it, as you know. There's many contexts. Can't speak on colleges and universities. If you're going to say something that might upset the very sensitive neurons of the woke, right? And similarly, you can't have a civil conversation with somebody who may have a different perspective because they then accuse you of being racist or an imbecile. We haven't got freedom of movement. We don't have freedom of religion. These are some of the things that we've lost. But what about freedom to own and enjoy property? That's an interesting one, isn't it? How many people here own their property without a mortgage? Raise your hand. I want to see. Okay. If you think you own your property, just don't pay your taxes and you'll find out who owns your property. But one of the things that I find really maddening is the loss of families to be the moral, culture, and spiritual pillar of society to pass on to future generations values, principles, accountability, responsibility, beliefs, critical thinking. That's been taken over by the woke school system. And this is why it's so important for families to get this back, because the youth of society need to be educated in proper values. And how many people here would prefer that for example, the funding follows the student so that the parents have a choice whether their kids go to a public school system or a charter school system or some other school system? This is all about choice. Now, let's look at just a couple comments about the Great Reset. I think everybody kind of knows it, but I think it's important to understand a couple of key points if you're not unclear about some things. So this is a highly influential movement by the global elites of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations under a contract that they've signed called Agenda 2030 to reset the global economy and the fabric and structure of society using banks, governance agencies, and environmental, social, and governance metrics to control billions of people around the world. And so this is the way to work. You'll be given a digital ID, there'll be a digital currency, and you will have an ESG score, an environmental, social, governance, social credit score, if you will, that will grant you permissions to purchase, travel, or do anything more in society based on your compliance with the government edicts. Now, you've probably heard this many times, as Klaus Schwab has said, you will own nothing and be happy. Please raise your hand if you agree with Klaus Schwab. I don't see anybody agreeing. So the question... All right. So, these are freedoms that we've lost and freedoms that we will lose if we do nothing. Let's look at prosperity from the perspective of our energy system and from the perspective of confiscatory taxation, if you will. Now, as you know, we've been blessed with the third largest oil resource in the world. We have in Alberta 97.3% of all the oil in Canada, right in this province. We've been blessed. Many other jurisdictions in the world are jealous of us. I want you to think about that. Now, of this amazing natural resource, we have enough energy to actually fuel North Americans' energy requirements for 1,000 years. But by 2030, we need to reduce, according to the federal government and the World Economic Forum, that they've agreed that we're going to reduce our energy supply by 42%. And to phase it out altogether by 2050 or preferably before that, according to the federal government and the World Economic Forum. Again, if we do nothing. We're vilified for our natural resources, our oil, but yet we only produce 0.15% of the CO2 global emissions. It's inconsequential. If we stopped everything right now, it would make zero difference. But more than that, there's no study that shows the consumption of CO2 by our 320 billion trees in our boreal forests and our agricultural lands and our muskeg. But it's thought by many that we are probably already still CO2 negative. Anyhow, CO2 is plant food. There is nothing harmful about CO2. And this is really important to understand, but we're fighting an uphill battle, but it's not a battle that we have to lose. We can win this. We can win this battle. And we can win this battle through education. So one of the things that, when you're talking to an environmentalist, an eco-radical person, and ask them the question if they understand how much land is required to have a coal plant or a gas plant, they won't know the answer, but the answer is about 4 acres. Ask them how much land is required to put a wind farm in place to replace that energy of 1 gas plant or 1 coal plant that sits on 4 acres. They won't know the answer, but you know the answer because I'm going to tell you. 2,500 acres. Now how is that ecologically sensible? And who asked the birds for their permission, by the way? Now, it's impossible to have this kind of infrastructure in terms of wind turbines and solar arrays all over the place without the oil industry. You cannot create this without the oil industry. So that's a question that you need to pose to the people, because you all have people in your circle that don't understand that. And they don't understand the boreal forest issues either. Now, in addition to that, ask them, when you're chatting with them, say, can I have your cell phone? Or if they've got a laptop or an iPad, can I have your iPad? And they'll just give it to you because you've asked nicely. But then don't give it back. Until they understand that you can't create those cell phones and those iPads and those computers without the oil industry. How many people here know how many products emanate from a barrel of oil? Yeah, somebody from Blackie, when I asked this question, had the great answer. He said, all of them. That was a great answer. But in any case, you can look it up. It's over 6,000 products, anyhow. Everything from the roads that we drive on to what coats this cable, contact lenses, medications such as aspirin, Tylenol, and many other products, including anesthetic agents. Now, one of the things that I find really particularly maddening, and I just learned this the other day. I think Trevor, who's here, we were at a conference in Calgary called Freedom Talk, put on by Danny Hozak. It was pretty good. There was some really good climate stuff that was discussed. But one of the things I learned is that the first climate concern that was raised was in 1864. And I thought it was just in the last 100 years, but 1864. So here's the point. Not one climate apocalyptic prediction has ever occurred. Not one. And yet, we're told by Miss Cortez, senator or congresswoman in the US, we only got 12 years before we're all gonna die because of climate change. So if over 100 years, there hasn't been one apocalyptic climate prediction that has ever unfolded, the question is when will they ever learn? And I don't know. You know the song, when will they ever? I can't sing with beat, but you know the song. And here's something else that's relevant to understand. Why it should really stiffen your spine is, anybody read the Allen report? Anybody know who Steve Allen is? He's a forensic accountant, and he was hired by the provincial government to look into foreign government spending to inhibit the development and transport of our natural resources. And between 2003 and 2019, $1.3 billion was spent to prevent Alberta from developing and transporting our natural resources, particularly oil and gas. And where did this funding come from? Believe it or not, it came from partly our federal government. It came from some provinces. It came from competitor countries. It came from competitor oil and gas interests in other countries. And in a worldwide competition for energy, and the World Economic Forum has targeted Alberta to be number one, it was pretty easy for all of these other funding sources to target Alberta. Doesn't that make you mad? Yeah. Okay, so let's look at confiscatory federal taxation. Every year, roughly $55 to $60 billion of federal taxes leaves this province, of which we get back 27 in federal transfers, provided that we're good boys and girls and we do what we're told. We overfund the pension plan by $3 billion a year. In the context of equalization and in the context of the national energy policy, since 1965, we have given nearly $700 billion to Ottawa, for which we've received zero back, not one penny. So the question is, what are we going to do about this mess that we're in? And what's coming? We have three options. The first option is to do nothing. And I'm going to give you a metaphor for doing nothing. I want you to consider Alberta is a canoe, and you're the inhabitants of that canoe, but it just happens to be that canoe is floating along the Niagara River. And eventually, you're going to hear the rush of the falls. And you got time to paddle to shore at one point. But a little later on, it's too late. You're going over the falls into the abyss of the hell of the Great Reset if we do nothing. Please raise your hands if you feel like you would like to take that trip down the falls. Somebody sort of raised his hand for a second, then he must have thought about it. Sir, would that be in a barrel? So, then we have two options. And it's really important to understand the two options. We can try and fix Alberta's circumstances within Confederation, or we can chart a new path forward as an independent sovereign nation. So I'm going to poll you all. How many people here would prefer that Alberta remain in Canada, but has control of its wealth and control of the programs in its own affairs, like controlling healthcare, development, and transport of natural resources? How many people would prefer that Alberta stay in Confederation? Please raise your hand. Don't be shy. Okay. That's maybe, what would you say, 10% from up there in the gallery? Maybe 10, 12% of the audience. How many people would prefer that Alberta get out of Dodge? Right. Okay, well, this is an important point to understand, and this is absolutely critical. And this is a point that you need to discuss with your friends and neighbors and children. Now, let's look at fixing Alberta's circumstances in Confederation versus getting out of Dodge, because there's something important that can align these two perspectives. And I'm going to tell you about that in a sec. But let's consider fixing Alberta's circumstances in Confederation using a metaphor, which is ending equalization. Because we had an equalization referendum, 62% of the population that voted in favor of ending equalization. How many people here, raise your hand please, think that it's possible to end equalization? Okay, there's a few more, okay. So again, this is quite important to understand. So think about ending equalization as a metaphor for ending any egregious program that harms Alberta's interests, your interests. Now, in order to end equalization, there are 3 hurdles. The first hurdle to understand, well, I guess it's not really a hurdle, it's more an educational point, because the rubber meets the road really with the constitutional issues. But we're going to look at ending equalization through the lens of history, the structural electoral imbalance, and then finally the 5 constitutional hurdles. So, historically, most of you know that Alberta was incorporated into Canada September 1, 1905, thanks to the efforts of Sir Clifford Sifton, who was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But the fix was in for Alberta in 1904. And how do we know that? Because this is what Clifford Sifton said in 1904. He said, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire," and when he refers to Canadian patriots, he's referring to those people who live in the regions of Quebec and Ontario. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies is Alberta's wealth, shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to our prosperity. Not Alberta's prosperity, the prosperity of the East. We started as a colony in 1905. 116 years later, we're still a colony. And we continue to be pillaged and plundered for the benefit of the East. And over 116 years, not one federal government and not one provincial government has ever protected Alberta's interests or assured Alberta's self-determination and future prosperity. Not one. So why would anybody think that the next 116 years is going to be any different? And if you understand the Great Reset, it can only be a lot worse. So what's the other alternative? Well, that's Alberta to become an independent sovereign nation. But both of those 2 paradigms, fixing Alberta's circumstances and confederation, and Alberta becoming a sovereign nation, are impossible right now. And the reason is because we have no leverage. We have no negotiating power. We can't go to Ottawa and say, gee, we had a referendum on ending equalization. How about it? Because you know what the sequence of events that would have to take place in order to do it. We've just gone through that. So what leverage is possible to fix Alberta's circumstances in confederation or for Alberta to chart a new path forward as an independent nation? It's the leverage that you people can provide, and all Albertans can provide. And that's the leverage of a successful referendum on independence. It's really that simple. And we need to have the courage to support that. Because even if you want Alberta to stay in confederation or you want Alberta to become an independent nation, come together, folks. Because that's the only leverage that we have. That gives Alberta the moral and legal legitimacy to chart a new path forward, one way or the other. And here's the way it'll work. So you elect an independence-focused government in 2023, and I'll tell you how we're going to make that happen. And then, after that government is elected, the first bit of legislation is the Alberta Sovereignty Act, very similar to what the Free Alberta Strategy is proposing from Rob Anders and Barry Cooper and Eric Fromm, who I know quite well. And basically what that does is it accelerates the process of taking control of policing, pension, immigration, employment insurance, and provincial tax collection. Taking control of provincial tax collection sets the stage for taking control of federal tax collection. Now those 5 things are all legal and constitutionally available to Alberta to do. But nobody's had the courage to do it. No government's had the courage yet to even do that. In addition, the Alberta Sovereignty Act will also implement new regulations for Alberta-based banks, such as ATB or Service Credit Unions, such that the depositors are protected from CRA and from the federal government. How about that idea? how simple this is. So we've taken control of those things that we can within the Constitution. It's all legal. Then we have a referendum on independence, which will be successful. Now, the Alberta government has that legal and moral legitimacy to go talk to Ottawa and the other provinces. And Alberta lays on the line what it wants, which is basically to look after everything, period. Now, what could we fund as a province within Canada that has control of all of its own affairs? Probably one thing only, the military. That'd be it. There's really no other purpose for the federal government in terms of Alberta, but we can form our own military anyhow as an independent nation. So, I can see the Premier and the negotiators in Ottawa talking to the Prime Minister, whomever that might be at that time, and you have a 6 to 12 month period of negotiations, and Alberta doesn't get what it wants. It already has that moral and legal legitimacy, just like Brexit. Just say, adios, we're out of here. And it's that simple. It's that simple. So how is the Alberta Prosperity Project going to help make this happen? Well, our intention is to grow the membership to 500,000 to 1 million to 1.5 million. The other day I said, why not make it 2 million? And here's the point. Who loved Ralph Klein and Ralph Bucks? He was a great friend. I love that guy. Anyhow, he used to say, find a parade and get in front of it. So guess what we're doing? We're creating a parade. We're creating a movement that no provincial government and no party can ignore if they want to be government. That's what we're doing. And it's really fundamental to understand the 3.5% rule. It's kind of interesting. I had to learn this myself about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. But that term was coined by Erica Chenoweth, a Harvard professor. And what she did was she studied societal movements over a couple hundred years. And she determined that 3.5% of a population can change the direction of that society. So when Jason Kenney and the UCP were elected, and I know Jason quite well, actually. We haven't had much correspondence lately. They had 120,000 members. That's 3.5% of the electorate in Alberta. So what do you think 500,000 or 1 million or 1.5 million members of the Alberta Prosperity Project are going to be able to do to influence the outcome of the next election? And this is why it's important. I'm so delighted to see such a large number of people here today, because each one of you has the opportunity to educate others and to encourage them to come to other events when they want more information, or to go to the website and see what has been drafted there as to how we will do all of these things and how we will answer all of these questions. So right now, we've also engaged an international marketing and advertising company called Rapid Boost. And we're rolling out this educational platform on every media platform possible: social media, legacy media, Touch Broadcast in Canada, radio, television, Western Standard, Rebel News. It's been wonderful working with the media as we're getting ready to roll things out. And probably some of you have seen some of the material already on social media, and maybe some editorials in the Western Standard, for example, as well. In addition to this educational platform that we're rolling out, we're also setting up educational chapters throughout the province. And these are hubs also to educate people in those regions. And I thought, up until we were in Staveley the other day, that we would set up maybe 90 to 100 chapters throughout the balance of this whole year. To my amazement, Pam or Shannon, or both of them, told me that we're already at 130 chapters. Unbelievable. And I think there's 39 or 40 or something like that that are in the wings to be set up as well. So if you think about this, let's just do the math. So let's just say we had 200 chapters. You had 10 members of each chapter, and each member is challenged to get 100 members signed up. Right there, that's 200,000 members. You see how easy it is that we can build this community together? So let's do it. I'm just about done. And I know that Shannon and Pam, usually they're doing this. But I want you to remember a couple of things. Freedom is not free, and you cannot have prosperity without freedom. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I used to teach my residents who were looking after patients, and if there was some issue that came up, I'd always tell them, I didn't have to tell them very often, but there are three kinds of people in this world. There are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and there are those who wonder what the hell happened. So, we're trying to make something happen, and you're all here today because I believe that you guys also, ladies and gentlemen, want to make something happen. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Dennis Modry. Okay, so I forgot to say a couple things, and I got in trouble from the principal over there. The events coordinator, she likes things done. So the memberships, we have memberships available at the front. I did mention that, but they're only $20. So, like I said, that helps us, stay on the road. And also the petitions are at the front table. And if every single person in here signs that petition, that puts us close to that 500,000 mark, or the 3.5% that Dennis spoke about. Let's get that done. Oh yes, and they'll tell you how to fill it out correctly, because the information has to be just so for the names to count towards the numbers, okay? All right, and these we have the question and answer period, and obviously you guys have been to one of our events before, because there's probably 10 or 15 questions already over there. So we ask that you write your questions on these little cards, bring them to one of the volunteers. I'll read the question, and the presenters will answer them. And I also ask that you write in your very best penmanship. You get an extra assignment and miss your recess. Our next presenter is from Lloydminster, Alberta. He is a brilliant industrial organization economist and a published author. He is a speaker and commentator on political and ethical issues, and has studied under some of Canada's foremost economists. With his keen interest, wit, and bright mind, he offers so much perspective to the Alberta Prosperity Project, and he's here to demonstrate the many merits and benefits of a free and prosperous Alberta. He is also the acting VP of Economics for the Alberta Prosperity Project. He cares deeply about the state that Alberta finds herself in, and about how intrusively our governments meddle in our economy to facilitate our ruin. Here with an economic forecast for the independent nation of Alberta, Mr. Tanner Hnidey.
Before I commence my speech, I might just add a little bit onto what Dr. Modry said. He told you, quite correctly I think, that if Alberta and Canada were to stop producing oil and gas tomorrow, carbon emissions wouldn't change. He's correct, I believe. I think we can add more to that. As you know, Canada produces or ships 4.3 million barrels of oil every day to America. It could be much more than that if we had the capacity to do so. But suppose that tomorrow we stopped doing that. Cut it off completely. Well, America would have a differential of 4.3 million barrels of crude that they would need to make up. That differential would be assumed by who? Foreign nations, whose carbon standards are incomparable to Alberta, whose moral standards are incomparable to Alberta's. And so you might actually, if Alberta and Canada stop producing oil and gas tomorrow, inject more emissions into the atmosphere and not less. Now, at the beginning of the 18th century, there was a man. So, excuse me, this is his quote. There is an economist named Jean-Baptiste Say, and he's studying the beginning of the 18th century. And as he's doing so, he discovers something. He says, 50 years before the time of the Bandini of Siena, both from reason and experience, it was shown, and it has been shown, and it continues to be shown, that there never has been a scarcity of food, except in those countries where the government had itself interfered to supply the people. So what Baptiste Say, this famous and old economist, discovered, was that unless government decided to centrally plan food, there wasn't a shortage of food. Now, I was initially serenaded into the discipline of economics, in part because it was promoted to be a jack of all trades, to be a successful economist, or, in my case, to be an economist. One must examine, at the very least, a rudimentary knowledge of various subjects. So, today, for the moment, we are going to transform into chemists and study some atoms. And I hope I do a good job, because my dad is in attendance today and he taught chemistry, so if I'm wrong. On the one hand, I have a nitrogen atom. On the other hand, I have a nitrogen atom. And the two, like Romeo and Juliet, magnetized, unite together in molecular matrimony, and together they form N2, two nitrogens. And that's the way that nitrogen naturally exists in our atmosphere. 75 to 77% of our atmosphere is this N2. Now, as you know, crops like durum and malt, other cereals, like to munch on nitrogen for food. They need it to grow big and strong with abundant yields. Now, the problem is that crops can't digest N2. They cannot convert it into nourishment. So, like blending solid food into a puree for a baby, the N2 needs to be ripped apart and broken down into a soluble meal for the grain. Now, specific crops like peas or plants like clover can perform such a reaction. and deposit consumable nitrogen into the soil. But as you are aware, that process is slow and inefficient. And so, we're going to take a trip to Redwater, to one of the largest synthetic fertilizer plants on the continent. And we're going to watch the Haber process in action. Here's how it works. You take some air, regular, everyday air, and you take some certified Alberta natural gas. And you break down the air into pure nitrogen, and you break down the natural gas into pure hydrogen. Then you transport the nitrogen and the hydrogen through a searing hot compressor. Smash the atoms together and synthesize NH3, ammonia. And lo and behold, Redwater creates fertilizer, or nitrogen that crops can eat. And it's literally one of the most important inventions of all time. Vaclav Smil, who is an environmental professor, argues that without this production of fertilizer, in the year 2000, let alone 2022, nearly half of all land, of all ice-free continents, would need to be occupied for farming, instead of the just under 15% that's actually utilized today, thanks to fertilizer. More than that, and this is really going to send environmentalists into a frenzy. Smil concludes that some 3 to 4 billion people have life today who otherwise wouldn't, because of nitrogen fertilizer, which also means that countless billions are alive because of Alberta's industrious grain and beef producers, hard-working truck drivers, and diligent agricultural traders, all of who have done more to eliminate world hunger than anything the federal government or the WEF or the UN have ever done in the history of their existence. But as you know, something is happening. Something is going on with the price of fertilizer. My best friend is a farmer. Just a little while ago, he purchased fertilizer for $700 to $800 per ton. Right now, $1,700 per ton. And so I want to dissect for you, from an economic perspective, what's actually happening. Why are fertilizer prices so high? And is there anything an independent Alberta could do about it? Imagine you are the current government. Imagine you are a bureaucrat, armed with every tool and every statistic at your disposal. If it's information you require, information you shall have. Your first contact is an economist, and he informs you of what is perhaps the fundamental rule of economics. He tells you, all else equal, the less of something you have, the higher its price. The less of something you have, the more valuable it is. And that value is reflected in the price. And so the higher the price, the more valuable something is. Sources proceed to tell you that the geopolitical disruption in Ukraine and in the Russian bloc aggravated by federal sanctions against Russia, will reduce Russian imports of fertilizer into Canada by about 30% this year, which is significant when you realize that 85 to 90% of all fertilizer used in Eastern Canada is a product of Russia or Belarus. And so there's less fertilizer, and the price will rise. Then you realize that COVID, or governments acting under the cover of COVID, have disrupted and fractured supply chains. And so from an economic perspective, there is less fertilizer, and the price will rise. And woe is the Canadian currency. The Bank of Canada has printed too much money, and they've constructed a Frankenstein of inflation. And so input costs for fertilizer are therefore rising. And so the price of fertilizer will rise. You therefore arrive at the conclusion that the markets need to open up. The central bank needs to stop printing money, and government needs to get out of the business of business. The problem is that your solutions make sense, and so you are promptly removed from office. So instead, it's appointed that environmentalists, environmental activists, are going to decide what to do. Here is what they're going to enforce. This is real. It's from their Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy plan. Quote, they are going to introduce a national emission reduction target of 30% below 2020 levels from fertilizers and work with fertilizer manufacturers, farmers, provinces, and territories to develop an approach to meet it. Because, they say, direct emissions with synthetic nitrogen fertilizer application have increased by approximately 60% since 2005, and these emissions are projected to keep increasing. There's no mention about the increase of population and so on, but anyways. So we know that the price of fertilizer is a problem. But what does the Canadian government do about it? They artificially restrict supply. So there is less fertilizer, and therefore the price of fertilizer will rise. But they are not finished with their work yet. They are not ready to retire from lending a helping hand. So you and I remember that natural gas is a critical and major component of fertilizer and for producing fertilizer. Now, its price, as you know, is already soaring, but apparently the prices aren't high enough because the federal government announced and implemented a carbon tax and a cap on fossil fuel emissions at 2020 levels with declining 5-year caps beginning in 2025, and a promise to cut methane emissions from oil and gas by 75% by 2030, while also proudly announcing they're not capping the emissions of the cement, steel, aluminum, or forestry sectors. All of them Eastern enterprises. Think then for a moment, if the government actually wanted to reduce the price of fertilizer for the farmer's benefit and for my own and for your families, do these policies, inflation, carbon taxes, phasing out oil and gas, and literally reducing the amount of fertilizer that we're able to use. Do these make any sense to you at all? No. No. Unless the government has ulterior motives. I am not prepared to say I know every detail of their plan. But I can objectively tell you that government's measuring metrics of nitrogen are devious. Here is what I mean. We need, they say, to reduce fertilizer emissions by 30% to save the world. But as you know, there are steps and initiatives and techniques that the farmer can employ and does employ to mitigate many of those emissions from fertilizer. But government doesn't recognize them. That is, and I'm making up numbers here for easy math. These aren't the actual numbers, but the logic's the same. Suppose that under normal conditions, 1 ton of fertilizer produces 1 ton of emissions. But using innovative farming techniques, as farmers are doing, suppose that now 1 ton of fertilizer produces only half a ton of emissions. When you read the government's policy, you realize that they refuse to recognize that reduction. You see, to them, 1 ton of fertilizer means 1 ton of emissions, no matter what. And so, the only way to reduce emissions from fertilizer is to adopt the disastrous European policy of regulating how much fertilizer each and every farmer can apply. Which, again, all else equal, literally means that Alberta and Albertan farmers will be forced to produce less food. That is the policy which our government is going to adopt, or has adopted. That is the problem. But I am convinced that Alberta's independence is secure. You say, how? Well, you start by confiscating all carbon tax policy and you incinerate that legislation in a furnace and then you burn it. Not only so, but you constitutionally enshrine what's known as free banking in Alberta to at once remove the government's monopoly on the money supply. By doing so, you totally lock up its ability to print excessive dollars, thereby creating inflation. And when that happens, of course, then inflation will be crushed and will end in our province once and for all time. When you enact these things and you allow the markets to work, of course, the price of fertilizer will change. It won't be restricted. When you allow farmers to farm as only farmers know how, unmolested by the federal government, there'll be more fertilizer available. It will be in abundance, higher abundance, and the price will fall. And these are just a few of the measures an independent Alberta could, and in my opinion should, adopt. And there are many, many, many more. And it is once those policies are adopted that I, as an economist, will have absolutely no hesitation to state that Alberta will become one of the most profitable, wealthy, and freest nations in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tanner Hnidey.
Regarding high fertilizer prices, it also should be noted in this room right now, our farmers today, if they put on proper fertilizer, have a chance to make the most money per acre than any time in history, with the commodity prices the way they are. So if we talk about the big gloom and doom, it is not gloom and doom on our farms. If they choose to farm properly and use the fertilizers that they can, they will make more money with the way the commodity prices are today than they ever have in history.
We have that actually as a question, so we can talk about that at the question and answer period, okay? Thank you. All right. Sure. So you guys are doing a really great job with the writing of these cards, and I've got about 20 of them, so that's really good. All right, our next guest is a well-known, courageous defender of the rights and freedoms, not only of himself, but of everybody that he meets. I have heard him speak on many occasions, and I can tell you that the energy he brings when he gets behind a hold of this microphone, and it's also really difficult to get the microphone back, I might add. He will spark a passion in all of you that you will want to be part of righting all of the wrongs that have occurred. He has been standing strong and sacrificing so much for the well-being of his family, his friends, and also for perfect strangers. He made the trek to Ottawa, where he joined the front lines in the convoy to end all mandates. He advocates for truth and freedom everywhere he goes, and from what I understand, he also makes pretty good pancakes. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, Chris Scott.
So, I did it again. On the way up here, it was an hour and 45-minute drive from here. I had speeches rolling through my head and so many great things I wanted to talk about, and I have no idea what those things were. But the beautiful part is, as I listened to Dr. Modry and Tanner speaking about some of this stuff, it really gets me thinking. Did it get you thinking as well? Now, there's a reason why we're in the situation we're in right now. Does anybody know what it is? Apathy. Absolutely. We were apathetic and we trusted other people to do the jobs that needed to be done on our behalf. When we took back the province from an accidental, ideologically motivated government that tried to destroy our province, I cheered and sat back down and said, awesome, this is great. Mr. Kenney is a strong conservative politician. He's going to save me. He's going to do the job and I won't have to do it. He's going to maintain my freedoms and make sure that I'm prosperous. How'd that work out? I do have to give him credit where credit is due, though. If his government hadn't have done the things that they did, specifically to me, I wouldn't be here. Because I wouldn't have been affected. And that's how I lived my life up until this whole situation arose. I didn't get involved until things affected me personally. And I think we're all kind of guilty of that to some
to some effect. But we don't have to continue to be like that. And I'm going to challenge you this. We cannot continue to be like that. Things like this movement, this idea that the APP is presenting and building, this is not a temporary thing. This is a rest of your life thing. Because if we get back into that mindset where, oh, we won, and now we can sit back and relax and trust other people to keep us free, we'll repeat the same cycle. And we have repeated the same cycle over and over and over through history. I mean, all you got to do is crack a history book and you can probably find 6 or 7 instances of tyrannical government because the people didn't get involved. Well, we're involved now, right? And it's not just us. As I drove across Canada in a truck that was not meant to drive across Canada, what I saw opened my eyes, and it was extremely encouraging. Because at the beginning of this, when I made the decision to open my restaurant and challenge the government to speak out against them and exercise civil disobedience, I was completely prepared for for them maybe to just crush me. I was prepared for that. I was going to lose my restaurant anyway, so what did it matter, right? May as well make a statement, make some noise, try and wake some people up and show them that, no, we should be standing up because what they're doing to us is wrong. And I felt very alone, except for my staff and my family. They supported me. How many other people here, when the pandemic started, thought to themselves and felt something is wrong, can't quite put my finger on it, but I don't want to say anything because I think I'm the only one. How many people felt alone in their thoughts? Look around the room, folks. You were never alone. And you're even less alone now than you were 2.5 years ago. Those people who were freezing their faces off, lining the highways on our way out to Ottawa, they're with us. They have also had enough. They've also seen that the way the world is going and the way things they're happening, their children's futures don't look quite as bright as they used to. And when people realize that, and they know they're not alone, it's very encouraging for them, and it gives them that motivation to stand up and do something about it. So here we are, standing up and doing something about it. But what are we doing? How does being in this room transform into action? How many people have heard me speak before? Wow. How many people have heard my analogy of the radio? Oh, I better tell you again. Does anybody remember what the federal government did with the media a few years, actually it was quite a few years back, I'm getting old. What did they do with the media? Well, yeah, they didn't buy them, they just gave them a subsidy and created a Canadian media fund to ensure that we always have proper, informed media presented to us in our homes, right? They bought the media, plain and simple. And in doing so, every single radio in all of our homes became a repetition for what the government wanted us to hear. CTV and CBC, I don't think they're completely full of bad people, but I think they're full of business people who realize that you don't bite the hand that feeds them. You don't speak out against the government that gives you $1.3 billion in subsidies, do you? We have a lot of folks like that in Alberta, some sitting MLAs right now. They don't speak up about what's going on because they are financially motivated to toe the party line. And I find that absolutely disgusting. Because those people are elected to be our voices. They're elected so that when things like the last 2 years happen and we need government to hear us, they're supposed to relay the message. When we say, we do not like the path you're taking us on and we're not going to go on this path, their job is to relay that message to leadership. And they didn't do it because they're self-serving. So, before I'm done, please don't let me forget to talk about soybeans. So there are groups out there who have these ideas about fixing everything by replacing some people and somehow keeping us off this own nothing and be happy path that we are on right now. I live streamed a little bit about I live streamed Dennis Modry's speech and Tanner's, and during Dennis's speech, somebody said, quit the stupid fear-mongering about the WEF and children in the room, it's PG-13 please, about the WEF and UN. Now, I have a request. When you hear people say stuff like that, be nice to them. Calling people sheep and belittling them isn't getting us anywhere. And it's not going to help us. I know it's difficult. I do that all the time, and I try really hard not to. But we need to try and lead by example. And the example we want to set is that we're respectful of other people's opinions, but we're going to take this path. We're going to achieve freedom and prosperity, and they're welcome to come with us. So anyway, they said, quit talking this stupid fear mongering about WF and the UN. I can see how people would think that that's fear mongering. For me, it's not. It's just observing the facts, reading their own documentation about what they want for our future, and forming an opinion about it. Back in 2008, somebody sent me a link to the UN website with some information on there about the Agenda 2030 and 2021 or whatever it was. And I was like, yeah, this has got to be fake. So I went to the UN website myself, and I dug through, and I finally found this. And it was there. I saw it in 2008. I saw that the UN wants to reduce the Earth's population to 1.5 billion people. It's the Sustainable Development Plan. I saw that the UN wants to have us live in certain areas, only certain areas. There was a map of the United States, and there was color codes for different population densities. Around California was high density. In the Midwest US, there was some, and then on the East Coast. Everything else was low density, as in you're not allowed to live there. They wanted to tell us what we could eat, how much we could eat, where we could live, what we could drive, what we could use as transportation, how many children we could have, everything.
What medicine you can take?
What medicine you can take. Well, they're doing that now, aren't they? Luckily, though, somebody accidentally forgot a 15-liter pail of ivermectin in the back of my car once. So anyway, when I speak about the UN and the WF and what they want to do in the name of preventing an apocalypse of climate change, it is real. It's not a fairy tale, it's not a conspiracy theory. You can read it for yourself if you take the time. You're welcome to go and read it, and then call me stupid afterwards if I misinterpreted it.
It's even on the Government of Canada's website now. As of 2 or 3 years ago, if you look up Agenda 21, or it's changed now to Agenda 2030, Government of Canada, it is great.
Yes, it's there. It's there for us to see. They're literally telling us what they want to do.
Yeah.
And yet people are calling me stupid because I want to prevent it. And I don't really care. What they say or what they do isn't going to affect what I'm doing. What I'm doing is everything I can to motivate people to stand up and assert the rights that you were born with so that you don't go down that path. That's my job now. And do you know what I hear from current sitting MLAs and politicians about this? Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. We're not interested in talking about that. They are not going to protect us from that. They are not going to keep us from going over the falls. They don't even want to acknowledge that the falls are there. And some of them are doing it, quite frankly, because it's financially beneficial to them. And I'm done with it. So when people tell me, oh, all we have to do is just fire Jason Kenney and we can make everything better. No, we can't. I'm sorry, but that's wrong. And you will see that. If you don't see it now, you're going to see it in the future. These folks that are doing this are telling me that I'm an amateur. I don't know politics. They've been doing this for years. They're professionals. Leave it to them. I left it to them for my entire adult life, and look where we are now. My restaurant was chained shut. I heard stories about people who lost family members because nobody would check on them because they were scared of COVID. I've heard stories about people's husbands and wives committing suicide because their business was destroyed by the policies our government put forth. I am done relying on other people and the professionals and the politicians to get us through this. And I think you are too. a time when there would be traveling theater groups come to my school, and they would put on plays, very good plays. I remember them to this day, and I don't remember what I had for breakfast. But I remember one play where they dressed up the gym like this post-apocalyptic world, and there was one little plant growing there. And the message was, you need to stop doing what you're doing right now, otherwise this is the future you're gonna have. There's gonna be one plant left, and the world is gonna be a mound of garbage because of what you were doing. So, I go home, and I give my mother trouble. I told her she needed to throw out her hairspray because she's putting holes in the ozone layer. Now, notice how I said I gave my mother trouble. I tried to give my mother trouble, and it did not work out well for me. There's one thing I fear in this world, and it is not authority, government, police, or anything like that. It is my mother. So that's the time I grew up in. You want to talk about fear-mongering? That's what happens in our schools. They tell our children that we're responsible for taking away their futures. Meanwhile, they're pushing policies that literally take their futures from them. They have them convinced that we are the enemy because we want to be prosperous. They have our children convinced, through things like what they did with my group in school, that the only way to save mankind, peoplekind, is to destroy ourselves. What happens when we shut down our energy industry? We freeze in the dark. What happens when we stop producing fertilizer and feeding the world? We starve. Are there starving people in the world right now? This is a perfect segue to soybeans. Some of the policies that we've seen in the last 20 years, at least when I've been paying attention, I know this goes longer than that, and I'm sure there's some folks with some really white or no hair here that remember. Some of the policies are literally killing people. And other people are promoting these policies and using them as some virtue signaling tool to make themselves feel better because they really are tools and they're inconsequential and they don't do anything. So when they get an opportunity to pretend that they've done something to benefit somebody else, they jump on it. Ethanol from corn. We have the world's, arguably one of the world's largest hydrocarbon reserves right underneath our feet in Alberta. And we grow food. And we burn it in our gas tanks. We celebrate when automobile manufacturers stop using fossil fuels to produce the foam in their seat cushions and they start using soybeans. Well, that's so great because oil's evil, it's dirty, right? Soybeans are clean. Soybeans feed people. Millions of people. So does corn. So do all of these other products that are being used as virtue signaling tactics to make the elite wealthy while people starve to death. That's the policies we're fighting here. This isn't about my restaurant or my business or wearing a mask or a vaccine or any of that stuff. This is about ending the government's ability to implement policies that hurt or kill us. Now, I'm sorry if I sound a little bit angry. But when I think about this whole idea of taking food from maybe somebody who can't afford food and using it so that we can feel more virtuous about buying a new truck with soybean tires and soybean seat cushions, it makes me sick. And what makes me even more sick is that we have people in places of authority making these decisions, drafting legislation, promoting these ideas because there's lobbyists who tell them it's a good idea. They present junk science to them that tells them we have to do this or it's going to be bad for everybody. And they, oh, really? Well, how much money do I get from that? Do you know our Prime Minister? Do you know how much he financially benefited from the most recent medical intervention that was pushed on Canadians? It was a lot. These people, I got it in there. These people who are financially benefiting off of our backs, our pain and suffering, have to be held accountable. And it's not... it's not going to happen by trying to use the old system. It's not going to happen to by trying to fix something that was designed purposefully to let this happen. How many people watched Mr. Hovens and his disqualification for the UCP vetting process?
Yeah.
He was not the only one, and I'll tell you why. Men like me, well, I mean, I got skeletons, but I'm a little different. But men like me and Tim and other people that have been disqualified, I never ran, by the way, for them. They're disqualified for a reason. It is not because Tim is a bad man. It is not because the constituents there don't want him to represent them. They did. He would have won. He would have wiped the floor with Nixon, for sure. But Tim is a good man. And he wants to be of service to his friends and neighbors. And that is not allowed. That system does not allow that. I pulled punches before. And I told people, you know what, if that's what you want to do, if you want to try and fix the old system, use your voices, become engaged, go ahead, do it. And I still say that. I would never discourage anybody from speaking out. But I challenge you to look within yourself. Well, that's difficult. Don't actually do that, though. Think to yourself, what is the real solution here? Where do we go? Are we going to do another old PC boys, same old system because we're scared of something else? Or are we going to focus on real solutions with real policy that prevents this from happening again? I mean, some of the stuff you've heard today sounds wonderful, does it not? Some of them are.
That's a very dumb one question. You ask them, tell them their speak. I did it.
Well, you know what I tell politicians? I tell them they're irrelevant. There's a reason why there's no politicians at the table here.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that anybody that's in politics is bad. That's not the case at all. I don't like politicians because they're in the job of politics. Who I elect to represent me, they are my servant, and I expect them to serve and represent my interests. There is a big difference. So when you leave here today, that's your homework. As you're driving, I want my words to haunt you. What is the real solution? Is what I'm doing going to be effective enough to actually accomplish the goals that I want to see happen? Am I being the change that I want to see in the world? Or am I doing what other people tell me to do because I'm fearful of what their other option is? I'll take questions at the end. Just give me a few minutes. I forget everything right before I say it, so I've already forgotten now. But that's my challenge to you. There is a whole sea of information out there. There are a slew of groups that are telling you that they're going to save you. They're not going to save you, you're going to save you. I'll tell you that right now. But eventually, there is going to be some sort of a vessel that we need to move forward and to accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish. But do not, for a minute, think that you being hesitant to do the right thing, and instead you do what you think will win, is going to accomplish what we need to happen. It won't. None of those folks, they tell me I'm crazy. Oh, I guess we're all crazy. When I say they, I mean those that are in charge right now, those in authority. They tell me what I'm saying and what the information I present from people that I've talked to, like world-renowned doctors, talking to a coffee shop owner for whatever reason, they tell me, well, I don't want to talk about that because it's different than what I see on TV. Or you mention, you know, Canada has actually subscribed to some globalist agendas, and how are we going to get out of this? Oh, well, don't worry about that. Well, I am worried about that, because I would like to own something and be happy. And I would like that for my children too. Is that the 5-minute mark? I'm going to leave it at that. I did have some more stuff to talk about. I wanted to talk about a show that I watched when I was a kid called The Smoggies that conditioned me to think about oil as being evil. Yeah. But I'll save that for next time. For now, that's what I'm going to leave you with. This is your job. The ball is in your court. I'm going to stick my neck out as much as I can. I'm going to run myself ragged like I have been already. And I'm going to continue bringing this message everywhere I go. But at the end of the day, the ball's in your court. And you have to decide what you're going to do with it. Are you going to smack that sucker out of the park? Or are you going to bunt it just because you're scared of taking a swing? It's up to you.
This is going to be super fun. Question time. Look at all that ones I've got.
They wouldn't let me speak longer, so I'm going to speak now. Oh, I'm just kidding. But I do want to say something while we're waiting. Where'd Chris go? Oh, he went to get a coffee. Okay. So, I want you to think about when private enterprise provides a product or service, and it costs $1 to provide that product or service. Do you know how much it costs government, your tax dollars, to provide that same dollar or service? Not quite, but it costs $3. That's how inefficient governance is. Just to think about it. So we are, of course, advocating for very small government. I just have a question before we answer questions. How many people here have actually looked at the website? Quite a few of you have. Okay, for those who haven't, please look at the website. I want to make 2 points. One is the policy and governance section documents what a sovereign constitutional republic would look like, not a province struggling to get out of confederation. That's the first point. The second point has 10 subpoints. I didn't say anything. She didn't hear that. But it's the vision. So what are we advocating for the vision? It's for Alberta to become a new sovereign constitutional republic that recognizes the supremacy of God as foundational to a constitution, civil society, and the rule of law. Wherein, as Tanner said, Alberta becomes the most free and prosperous country in the world to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. Where First Nations are at the table for the first time ever in creating this new nation. Where no one is left behind, and where workers' rights are protected, but business is allowed to thrive and create those jobs. And where healthcare, social services, and education are at the highest level in the world. And we know how to actually make that happen. And where each one of you and your descendants will have a much higher quality of life and standard of living. And Alberta, as Tanner has said, will be the #1 GDP per capita in the world.
He just answered 7 of the questions I have. So just to let you know, we allow probably 15 or 20 minutes for these. We probably won't get through them all, but they will be answered. I type them up, send them to these guys, they put answers, and then we put them onto the website. So if your question doesn't get answered, don't be upset. They will get answered and put on the website. Question number 1. Until Alberta Prosperity Project secures the safety of the banking system, how do we do offshore banking?
From a boat.
You could unpack that in a number of different ways. One of them is until Alberta has control of the banking system in Alberta. In other words, there's no federal government, Canadian federal government regulatory influence on the banking system in Alberta. What do you do between now and then? Well, that's a very good question. One of the things that you can do is you can buy, with whatever cash that you have available, a commodity such as gold or silver. That will protect you. That's one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is for those who are tech savvy and are interested in getting involved with cryptocurrencies, you could look at putting some capital, I wouldn't put very much, but put some capital into a cryptocurrency. And then the last thing that you could do as well is look on the website and find out the countries that are not implementing the agenda of the World Economic Forum, and you might want to buy some of their currency as well. Any other comments?
Well, I would say the situation that's at hand, that you and I are presently in, because of government's overreach into the banking sector, should, in my opinion, push us all the harder for Alberta independence, where the government is locked out of the banking sector and our private accounts and our private assets. Chris just said our money is not safe right now. He's correct. He's absolutely correct. I say, and this is not partisan, this is an objective statement. What our Prime Minister did by locking individuals out of their account, even for just a day, will have repercussions on our economy for decades to come. Because nobody now has confidence in our banking sector, and rightly so. And I would just add that we're not financial advisors, so we can't legally offer any financial advice. But from the financial advisors that I have talked to, it seems that the base advice, which again isn't tailored for an individual, but for a group, is diversify at present. That seems to be the best that we can do to protect assets. Even though it's not ideal, it's what we can do.
Don't you want to stay away from the cryptocurrency? It's not going to all weird. I agree. I think one day
Kate.
just cut it off and all the bitches will be gone. And if you stick money into it, I think that money will be gone. That's just also my opinion. I also do love the gold and silver, and also copper value is raising as well. But it's real tangible assets. Sorry.
Okay, so the question was about cryptocurrency. So Tanner will give you an explanation about that, and then we'll move on to the questions.
I just have something to mention real quick, and please do not take financial advice from me. Unless you want to own nothing to be happy. So, what you said was that someday they may turn off cryptocurrency and it might be just gone, right? What happened in Venezuela with their fiat currency? They didn't turn it off, but it became worthless because of bad government policy, bad leadership, right? And there is, our dollar, if there's anything I've learned in the last 2 years about currency, our dollar is very, very fragile. Look at the swings that it's taken just from the last 2 years. I think everything you do has to have a risk-benefit analysis, and probably talk to somebody much smarter than me, but I wouldn't for a moment think that a fiat currency is particularly stable or risk-free, even as crypto.
Right. I concur with that. That's in part why we're a proponent of a free banking system, because it introduces competition into the currency market. And so Albertans are free to choose which method or system of banking they prefer. It might be that they'd like to go to, or you'd like to go to a bank that has a gold standard and it's backed your earnings by gold. I think I would do that. I know I would do that. It might be that if an independent Alberta had a fiat currency, you want to go there and you're confident in it. Fine. Let the Albertan choose. And then the market will tell him or her what he should do. So if the fiat currency's inflation is roaring, as it is right now, then the individual can switch to gold. And that will force the fiat currency to stop printing. Force the bankers, to stop printing. Because if they don't, of course, they'll lose business. As to crypto, it might well be that your concerns are warranted. Again, at present, we have, you're right, diversity. I really like Chris's answer, which is perform risk-benefit analysis with financial advisors and so on. The idea behind particularly Bitcoin is actually quite complex, but also ingenious insofar as it's called blockchain. And if it was up to me, and I was able to create a voting system, I would use blockchain voting because it's incredibly difficult to commit fraud. It's literally impossible. That's why it's called cryptocurrency, because it uses cryptography. It's a form of math that's incredibly complex. But as we know, government is going to try to regulate it, and very heavily. So yep. I would agree. It's let an individual perform a risk analysis, let him do what he thinks is best. And again, I would say that the whole purpose of this talk is to say we have to get government out of the monopoly on this money supply. They cannot be allowed to decide what we have to use and what we put our assets into.
There's one other thing that people can do. And that's, I'll bet some of you have done this already, it's called bartering.
Okay, so just to let you know, Chris and Tanner and Dennis will be sticking around for a little bit, so if your question's not on the card, I'd like for you to ask it to them after we're done. Please. Are we small Westerners or big Westerners? In other words, are we better off going it alone, or are we better working with Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the territories?
Well, I'll start off answering that. Alberta is a rather more homogeneous population, and Alberta has a lot more potential to pull off independence than does Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Central BC at this particular point in time. However, at the same time, there are forces developing in BC and in Saskatchewan to implement something very similar to what we are doing. In fact, they want our platform, they want our material, and they'll modify it to their needs. But Alberta has to lead this. And yes, it would be great if Saskatchewan would come along. Northern BC is already aligned with us. Particularly with respect to the energy corridor. But I think the dominoes will fall. Yep. When we have that successful referendum on independence, I would bet you that prior to even completing the negotiations with Ottawa about leaving or staying, I'll bet Saskatchewan has their referendum as well. So I think we're happy to work with Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northern BC, Central BC, anybody that wants freedom and prosperity. And by the way, that truck there, we have that for a reason, because that represents freedom, and that pump jack represents prosperity.
So this isn't exactly related to that. Well, it's related to that question, but it doesn't answer it. Something I thought about a few months back was, as we drove across Ottawa, is that this is not just an Alberta problem. This is a Canadian problem, and it really is a global problem. People all over the world have had enough. They don't want to live like this. They don't want that future, and they don't know what to do. The other provinces, they're not quite sure what to do either. But Alberta has a very unique opportunity to be leaders, to lead by example and show the rest of Canadians who don't want to go down that path that there is a way. Because this is available to all the provinces, as far as I know. We were asked to join Confederation. We weren't forced, and it's an open-ended thing. So if the folks in the other provinces aren't happy with their position within Confederation, and they don't want to have that future for them and their children, we, in Alberta, can show them that there is a way. And I believe that if we truly care about our neighbors in Canada, it's our responsibility to do this, so that we can show them the way.
That's right.
Simply stated, saving Alberta may actually save the rest of Canada.
What is stopping the federal government from forcing us to do what they want, using the military?
That's a very good question. And one of the things that everybody needs to understand is the whole issue of fear tactics. Okay, and there will be these kinds of things that are raised to frighten us into kowtowing to what the federal government wants us to do. To begin with, when Quebec had 2 referendums on independence, there was no military issue of concern at all. That's number one. Number two, many soldiers in our Canadian military, I do not believe would attack Alberta. Number three, everything that we're doing is legal and has been approved at the level of the Supreme Court. So we're not doing anything illegal at all. Finally, the world recognizes the will of the people through a referendum. They recognize the will of the people. So I think it would be really just fear-mongering to think that the military would attack us. Now, there's one other thing I want you to know, and that is that particularly with the midterm elections coming up, let me ask the question, who do you think is going to win the House of Representatives and the Senate? The Republicans or the Democrats? Republicans, okay. I think that is true as well. So we have contacted already, and I can't say who, because it's confidential, but we would have U.S. military support. And why is that? Because as an independent sovereign nation, we give them access to the north, which also helps protect us.
How do you expect to remove big oil and gain control of our natural resources?
That's an easy one. In terms of international or other countries, foreign entities owning Alberta business in a new sovereign Alberta country, new sovereign nation of Alberta, we would disallow any foreign entity to own more than 49%.
This next question we get asked quite often. What are we going to do about being landlocked?
Tanner and I usually answer this question, but I've answered so many, I'm going to leave it to him this time.
One of my, when we were discussing this, Dennis and I and the rest of the board, we realized that at present, we're policy locked. So it might be that we live in Canada and supposedly have access to ports and all of these things. We can't get our goods there because we're policy locked. Now there's a common misconception, and we use the typical example as oil, because that's typically what everyone wants to ask about. How would we get our oil to market? Now we tend to believe that we have pipelines that start in Alberta and they go east and they go west and they go to ports, but it doesn't work like that. At present, some 98 to 99% of Alberta's oil is shipped south of the border, down to America, in the Gulf Coast, where they refine our heavy oil. And so it doesn't go east, and it doesn't go west. It's the nature of our oil. It's because it's heavy, and because the capacity to refine in America is so extensive that they take it, they chew it up, they love it, they can't get enough of it, except, of course, the American federal government. So we send it south. What I mean to tell you is that in an independent Alberta, landlocking isn't a concern. We would have a more proper ability to trade than we do now. What do I mean? I just mentioned Keystone XL. And when that happened, our Prime Minister said, when it was canceled, our Prime Minister said that he was so disappointed. He was just so disappointed. But what was the first thing he did after Keystone was canceled? Do you know? He appointed Stephen Guilbeault, who's a noted environmental eco-Marxist, to the position of Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. So you see, there's doublespeak. On the other hand, in an independent Alberta, that simply wouldn't fly. you would have proper negotiators heading down to America and so on to negotiate proper trade deals. More than that, suppose that Canada was upset that we gained our independence. And they said, Alberta, no more trade, no more port access for you. You can't get anything to the ports, say in Vancouver. Fine, we would say. We know that Vancouver is one of the largest ports on the continent. And we also know that a significant amount of goods come from that port in Vancouver over to Ottawa, Ontario, and Quebec in Eastern Canada. And unless you let us go to port, we won't allow a single good to cross through Alberta. And no overflights and all of these things. What I mean to say is we have significant economic leverage in an independent Alberta that we do not presently possess. So, to answer the question finally, would an independent Alberta have to worry about being landlocked? No, not at all.
Well, yeah, the other thing is that the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Articles 124 and 125 give purportedly landlocked companies access to tidewater, such as Switzerland, as one example. So there would be international support as well. And as well, we already have, we're aligning with northern BC. And just like the Supreme Court has ruled that the country is divisible, so too are provinces. And northern BC, guess where they want to get out from under? So we would potentially have a lot more access. Doing a deal with Manitoba, we'd have access to Churchill. Doing a deal with northern BC, we'd have access that way to the Pacific. So, and obviously, as an independent nation with US support as well, we'd have access to ports in the north as well.
What is your plan for the agriculture industry? You always address oil and gas.
Well, the agricultural industry should be virtually unregulated. I mean, we are advocates of a free market system. So you'll remember a number of years ago, you might remember a very courageous MLA by the name of Rick Strankman, and there were others, when there was a monopoly by the wheat board and Alberta couldn't sell its agricultural products at fair market value. So he went to jail for that as well. So these are people that stand up. And with respect to the agricultural industry, here's something really relevant to understand. If we were isolated and we had no access anywhere else, we have so much natural resources, agriculture, livestock, etc., we'd be self-sufficient. You ever think about that? We could actually be self-sufficient. But this whole business of climate change, and for example, reducing livestock and reducing meat consumption, because nonsense. Yeah, flatus happens, right? I mean, there's not much you can do about it. It doesn't matter if you're human or non-human. If you've got carbon as the basis of your viability, you're going to fart. And that's just the way it is. So like I said, I mean, look at the agricultural section in the policy and governance document, and you'll see just how robust it is to support our agricultural community, because we need them to survive.
So on that subject, so one of the things that's important to note is that a lot of the policies that we're subject to right now are the result of junk science, correct? They don't make sense, they're logical, they don't really have any place in a rational universe, but yet there they are. So while I'm not on the board of directors of APP, I'm just a speaker, I would be a very strong advocate to have a massive education campaign that told both sides of the story, that told both sides of clean coal and clean wind and solar. Side-by-side comparisons of all of these things that we've been told we have to give up in order to survive, right? Because we've seen the damage that's being done to the planet in the name of renewable green resources it's tragic. But it's not in the media, and we already discussed why that is. So that would be a very, very important thing to see even in a post-election Alberta, not even into an independent nation, but as massive education showing people why we need to get out from underneath these policies and how they don't work anyway. Because the people that subscribe to that stuff, we do need to reach them as well. And they're not just sheep, they've been fed this information, and it's important to have education.
Are you concerned about what you're doing causing a vote split between the UCP and the NDP?
That's another really good question, but remember, that's the kind of question that is fear-mongering again. Think about this. If you vote the same way you've always voted and you expect a different outcome, so you've got to think about this. And like I said earlier, remember the 3.5% rule. If we grow this, when we grow this to 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million members, there will be no vote splitting that is meaningful. There's always a little bit of vote splitting, but if we've got 1.5 million or 2 million people that have signed on to what APP is proposing, and you can look at a chart that we're going to be having on our website, and on the vertical axis, there's going to be the various parties, and on the horizontal axis, it's going to be what they're going to do. And you're going to look and you're going to see which party will protect your interests, your individual freedoms and rights, your self-determination and your prosperity, and who will hold a referendum on independence. You will see that, and you will know who to vote for. And there could be 2 or 3 of those parties. Now that is a little bit of vote splitting, but it's going to become evident over the course of this next year where you need to put your vote. We will help you channel that.
How long will it take to overcome the government and become our own?
Referendum 2005. Oh, does it 2005? Geez, that was wishful thinking. Yeah, 2025, referendum, 12 to 16, or 6 to 12 months of negotiation. So there you go. But a successful referendum, we've already won. Because it doesn't matter, if we stay in Canada, we've got everything we want. If that's the deal that is struck and we get everything that we want, and I want to be part of that negotiation, then we win. If we don't get everything we want, we're out, and we've won a game. So 2026 is the time where I think we really know what our future is going to be, and it's going to be our brilliant future, our amazing, brilliant future.
Is what we are looking to get related to leverage in Ottawa and potential separation from Canada going to be handled by the current Alberta government?
Well, that's a really excellent question. And the thing is that in 2023, no one knows right now which government is going to be elected. But you folks will decide that, right? And if that government is elected because you have created the movement that they have to get in front of, then at that point in time, that government has to do what you've said. Now, we have a constitutional lawyer on our board, Jeff Rath. He's been tearing apart Dina Hinshaw, if you watch. I asked Jeff a few weeks back, I said, Jeff, so we have this 2023 election, and we've got an independence-focused government that is elected, or a party that looks like they are going to get elected. Can we hold their feet to the fire legally by ensuring that they will do what we are advocating on behalf of all Albertans? And he said, legally, yes, we can. So isn't that an interesting thought?
Do you have concerns regarding large urban centers with respect to Liberal mayors, leftist policies blocking or hindering the momentum of the Alberta Prosperity Project?
That's another excellent question. They're all excellent questions. There's no question that's stupid. The fact is that we've launched what we're doing primarily in the rural communities. But we did have one in Sherwood Park, which, as you know, is a suburb virtually of Edmonton. And it was attended just like this. I think there were probably, maybe another couple hundred people present at that particular one, which was really wonderful for us to see. The thing is that people in Edmonton and people in Calgary, despite socialist mayors, also want their individual freedoms. They also want prosperity as well. They also don't like what's coming down the pipe with the Great Reset. So our challenge as a society, the Alberta Prosperity Society, which governs the Alberta Prosperity Project, is for us to get in front of those people in Edmonton and in Calgary and elsewhere in the larger urban centers in a way in which we can educate them. And we're going to be moving into Edmonton and Calgary soon, and we will be targeting all of these areas and ethnic communities as well, because oftentimes it's easier to get a group of people from an ethnic community together than it is just to get a group of Edmontonians or a group of Calgarians together. We'll see how that works. But remember as well that what we're rolling out with respect to our international marketing and advertising company, they're going to start being bombarded on billboards, on legacy media, and other forms of media as well. So imagine if you're driving down a road in Calgary or Edmonton and you see a big billboard and it simply says, what would you want if you knew what you could have? And at the bottom is just APP. That would tweak your thinking, wouldn't it? Right. So the thing is that we want to pose questions that engage people, because this is the key thing. If you can't engage somebody in a conversation, you're never going to be able to educate them on anything or give them a different perspective. So we're very much thinking about Edmonton and Calgary, and it's interestingly relevant that the head office for Rapid Boost is International Marketing and Advertising Company. Guess where their head office is? Edmonton. So we've thought about this, and we're really looking forward to getting into these areas. And there are chapters that are being set up, educational chapters, and the chapter leaders want to have presentations in Edmonton and Calgary. So this is happening very soon. It's not a question, but I think it's important to point out, and Shannon just asked me if I would make a comment on this, and the issue of First Nations. The reality is that we will never become an independent nation without First Nations being at the table. That's one thing. Second thing is that on our board, we have a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Corderell. And Lawrence is a former First Nations chief. He's run a $100 million business. And along with Lawrence on our board is Jeff Rath, a constitutional lawyer who's looked after Indigenous affairs for nearly 30 years. They've drafted, if you go to the website and you look at the policy and governance material, you look at the Indigenous section, they have, they're the ones that drafted that. Now, the other thing to be said is that the two of them are connected to all of the other chiefs. They know them all, and they believe that they can deliver 90% of First Nations to independence.
I just wanted to say something about the folks of the cities. So Edmonton's full of NDP voters, right? And there are brothers and sisters too, right? They want pretty much the same things we do, but they vote for different reasons. So they want more robust social programs. They want more, any marginalized people in society, they want them elevated. They have different needs than we do. They have different wants. But there is common ground there. One thing that I think it's important to note is that even the people that voted NDP, the ones that didn't vote out of an anger vote for the PCs, they didn't get what they wanted because they elected a government that was so blatantly ideologically driven that they caused the rest of the province to end up in an uproar and then punted that government just as fast as they elected them. So in the end, they didn't really get what they wanted. So with a free and prosperous Alberta, with an independent Alberta, what those folks want is within reach. It's tangible, it's plausible, and it's probable. And it comes down to education. All we have to do is show the NDP voter how their needs can be met in a free Alberta. And why would they waste a vote on anything else? Why would they waste a vote and potentially elect another accidental government, cause the province to end up in an uproar and punt them in 4 years? It wouldn't make any sense. So there is real hope to reach even the folks that are starkly different from us.
One of the questions you can pose to people as well, which I think is a good one, is particularly if they're just coming into the workforce. So I asked my wife's daughter this question. I said, what percentage of your paycheck would you like to go to taxes? She looked at me and she said, none of it. So the question is if we have a tax structure in which you pay a flat tax, this is all you will ever pay in terms of your income tax is 10%, as opposed to 45% or 50%. What do you think the answer for those young people, from those young people, will be? But that's a good question to ask, because we know from an economist perspective that it's possible to achieve those kinds of low taxes. Oh, and there's one other thing. It is possible as well to do something amazing, and that is to gradually phase out property tax, in which case you will then actually own your property.
So I've gotten the signal to shut down the questions twice now. So I just have a couple of things that we really should address here. So this question has been asked twice. I've got 2 cards with the same question. Please explain about the change from Alberta Unity Project to the Alberta Prosperity Project. Alberta Unity website is still up. Does the Alberta Unity membership transfer over to the Alberta Prosperity Project? So here's what, I can answer part of it and then I'll let you do part of it. So all of the memberships that are purchased as AUP have been ported over to the APP website, or they are supposed to have been. So if you have purchased one of those memberships under that banner and have not received anything from us, a newsletter or upcoming events or those kinds of things, I invite you to come and talk to one of the volunteers here at the front table or at the back table and give us your name and we will see what has happened. That's what I can do for you. On the other note, I'm going to let Dennis answer.
So with respect to AUP, we felt a need because of certain internal issues that we needed to rebrand. And in the course of rebranding from it was really the Alberta Unity Society, which controlled the Alberta Unity Project. We rebranded, and what we did as well is, as a consequence of what we needed to do there, we had Service Alberta suspend the Alberta Unity Society, and we had the bank account frozen. So that's before the courts right now. And we felt that the movement was far more important than certain circumstances that had occurred at that time many, many months ago, that the best thing that we could do is take the intellectual property which we drafted and to move forward with an enhanced board of directors in a way in which it would have appeal to the public, and in a way in which it would have appeal to certain benefactors that wanted to fund this massive educational program. So we just couldn't carry on with AUS, AUP, and that's the absolute honest answer at this particular time. And I'm not prepared to say who's right or who's wrong in all of this. We'll leave that to the courts to decide. Thank you. Good question.
Okay, 2 more questions. People always ask, what is a chapter? Dennis talked about the chapters. I think Chris alluded to the chapters as well. So what we have done is when we're at these events, we say to people, hey, come up and start a chapter. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is you will take our message back to your community and you will help deliver it. And by doing that, you help grow the membership and you help grow this movement so that we can reach the 500,000 to 1 million to 1.5 million people, so we can get an independent-minded government elected in 2023. That said, we have all of the tools you will ever need to be successful in starting a chapter and facilitating your success in order to get that done. So if there's anybody here that wants to be a chapter leader or to learn about that, Jason Lemieux is at the back table. He is a regional leader for Division 5 and 3, I think, 4 and 3. And Pam Koenig is here somewhere, and she is the division leader for right here, Division 6. So what happened was we thought that we were going to get about 50 chapters. We have 130, and we have 49 on the list to get started. So we are growing like wildfire, and we need you to help us with that. And the next question is for the audience, right before I dismiss my students and give you your homework. How many of you have purchased a membership with the Alberta Prosperity Project? Wow. How many of you will purchase a membership on your way out?
Oh yeah!
You guys are dismissed. Thank you so much. Point out, this is Pam Koenig right here. So I just want to leave you with some closing remarks, if you will just give me 5 minutes. And then you can go and talk to all these people. Okay, here's your homework. All right. So just to let you know, we have one chance to get this done. We've got one chance to have an independent-minded government elected, and that is next in 2023. So here's your homework. We need you to buy memberships. We need you to become chapter leaders. We need you to become volunteers. We need you to create events in your communities that will bring people together. We need people that have vision, and we need people that have ideas, and we need people that have energy. And we need you to bring all of that to this table. We need you to be the change you want to see in this world. Talk to your friends and neighbors and spread the word. And here's the thing, I'm going to tell you a little story. If you don't think that this is important to the kids, My granddaughter was at the Medicine Hat show. She's only 8. And she came to talk to me at the break, and she gave me a little hug, whispered in my ear, and she ran back to her seat. And then on the way home, she said, because I was surrounded by people, she said, "Grandma, were all those people wanting to become members of the Alberta Prosperity Project?" And I said, "Yes, some of them were." And her comment was, "I hope all of them join, because that's how we're going to win." We've got a vision for building a community of Alberta. We're building it within ourselves, and we want all of you to join. Our message is strong, our community is growing. Our solution, with no politicians at our table, is to unite 1.5 million Albertans, to stand together. That's something that has never been done before. You'll be on the right side of history if you join this movement. A true community is not about being geographically close to someone or part of the same social network. It's about feeling connected and being responsible for what happens. Alberta is our ultimate community. And everyone here plays a crucial role in that community. Therefore, we must become bigger than we have ever been, more courageous than we have ever been, greater in spirit, larger in outlook. We must become members of the new race of Albertans, overcoming petty prejudice, owing our ultimate allegiance not to the government, but to our fellow men, women, and children. Alberta will become a sovereign constitutional republic, one where First Nations sit at the table as partners in the creation of the new nation of Alberta. And on that great day, Alberta truly will become united, strong, and free. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing. As volunteer coordinator for Alberta, when I ask you to volunteer, I'm not asking for hundreds of hours a month. I'm asking for the time it takes you to hand out a rock card to your neighbor, to share with them what APP is. I'm also asking you to be willing to join a chapter. You don't have to be the chapter leader, just join and help us get the word out to everyone you know. Thank you all so very much for coming today. God bless.